Hello, and welcome to another fun-filled, fantabulous episode of the Comic Watchers Show. With me, as always, is Nicholas Osborne. I am your host, Matt Meyer. Missing in action this week, taking a well-deserved vacation, is Mike Eakins. And sitting in the guest slot this week for our first official, unofficial crossover with our sister show that gets more views than we do, Mutant Watch, Gabriel DeJesus. Gabriel, welcome so much to our silly little show.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
The only time I was ever been on Comic Watchers was on our little Mutant Watcher backdoor pilot that we had.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Almost a full year ago now.
Yeah, that has been a while. Well, yeah, I mean, you guys are just killing the game over there on Mutant Watch. You and Duna, who sends her regrets. She wanted to be here, but it's the middle of the night for her. So so it goes. But we are doing this crossover in honor of this week's release of Way of X, #1, courtesy Cy Spurrier, Bob Quinn, Java Tartaglia, and on letters, Clayton Cowles. This is a big, cool release. It is an inflection point for the Krakoa saga. We really couldn't wait to get into it. So what better time to talk about some X-Men stuff. But first, we got a little bit of news floating by this week. Nicholas Osborne, what do we have?
I guess the biggest news that happened is Marvel dropped the Shang-Chi trailer. And the newest, Marvel Cinematic Universe movie. Everybody's super hyped for it. They dropped the teaser poster of the actor, is it Sam Liu? I think I may be mistaken on that, who's actually starring as Shang-Chi, but dropped the poster like within a couple of minutes and was like, trailer coming soon. But it happened to be his birthday, so Marvel randomly drops the trailer like minutes after the poster. And I'm not even lying about that. I was posting the actual Shang-Chi poster on our Comic Watch account while they dropped the trailer. So then I had to hurry up and follow up with another post on that one.
Wacky.
It's pretty exciting. I've got the poster here that we can see. It's Legend of the Ten Rings. And I noticed something some fans have been sharing around, that there have been some little Easter eggs all the way back through like in Iron Man in 2008. About the logo for that you see right behind Shang-Chi there with the 10 rings. Mm-hmm. When Tony Stark was kidnapped, and you can see it in the flag behind him. There's quite a few different ways that pops up, that they've been slowly inserting the 10 rings in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Yes. So it's pretty exciting.
Yes, all the way from the beginning. There has been some drops and some hints and some... maybe we'll do Mandarin, maybe we won't, maybe it'll be Ben Kingsley pretending to be Mandarin. Oh, there's a real Mandarin too. And then we haven't heard anything in about 8 years now on the Mandarin front. Of course, Mandarin himself is a little bit of a tough nut to crack, because sort of like the Ancient One in Doctor Strange, the original vision of the character is based on some pretty racist and outdated tropes. So Marvel has kind of had to come at this from some creative, different angles. I'm very, very excited to see what they do. Obviously, in the original Master of Kung Fu comics from the Bronze Age, Shang-Chi's father was Fu Manchu, whom also terrible Yellow Peril character, but more pertinent to this conversation, Marvel doesn't own the rights to that guy anymore. So they literally can't do it, even if he wasn't a terrible, terrible stereotype. So we get Mandarin now as Shang-Chi's father. And you know what? I like it. I like it a lot, because it just makes there's a nice little marriage there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's definitely something everybody's really looking forward to. Trailer already had tons of hype online.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody's ready for it. Should be really cool.
Also, Nick, I don't know if you caught this. This was just sort of dropped today at random, but Russell Crowe was on a show in his native Australia, and he revealed that he is playing Zeus in the upcoming 4th Thor movie. So that means that Hercules is coming, and Zeus has been eating well. If you've seen any recent pictures of Mr. Crowe with his dad bod, and his hand jammed down the back of his pants. It's quite amusing if you don't know what I'm talking about. No, but I like Russell Crowe a lot as an actor. I actually think that he's when he's not being arrogant in general as just a human being, he's a pretty decent actor. So I'm looking very forward to that.
Yeah, definitely. It should be pretty exciting. It's Marvel, how much of a miss can it be? And
Honestly.
if Hercules is going to show up, Gabriel's like,
Listen. If you're on the fence about Hercules as a character, go back, pick up the Incredible Hercules run by Greg Pak.
Yes.
It is phenomenal. Ran around 30-ish issues, spun out of World War Hulk in 2007, 2008. Outstanding stuff. It's got Amadeus Cho in it. Bonus.
I honestly couldn't care about Hercules prior to that series.
Yeah, I was incredibly ambivalent about the guy. It's just like, okay, whatever. Dude's in a toga. It's cool. Funny leggings. But no, he represents... he's one of my favorite B-list Marvel characters now. So yeah, let's bring that on.
And I don't know how much it ties into it, but there's been some pretty fun little controversy, I guess, between Marvel and Sony with their films lately. I think it was last week the news broke that Sony signed a deal with Netflix for the Spider-Man movies to move over to the Netflix platform. So you've got Venom and upcoming Morbius, all the Spider-Man stuff. And everybody was like, does this kind of signal a rift? I think we talked about it a little bit with, between Disney and Spider-Man. Are they going to break up? Is that universe not connecting anymore? But recently, I think a couple of days ago, news broke that Sony has signed an agreement where after they expire on Netflix, then they'll be moving over to Disney Plus.
Yeah.
And, there's something there. There's a story behind that.
The story is that Sony's getting a lot of nice paychecks.
Well, Sony would be idiots to break up this shotgun wedding with Marvel. When they signed that initial deal to share Spider-Man, they'd only had I think 9 movies slated for production that entire calendar year. That is not the sign of a healthy studio at all. And I mean, really, yeah, they've had some surprises. Surprises like Venom made way more money than it had any right to, and other things here and there. But just generally speaking, Sony as a production house, as a studio, is not exactly 6 years later on very solid ground still. I don't think. Maybe I'm utterly mistaken, but I just can't see it being in anybody's best interest for them to break away from Marvel for any reason.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess it's time to finally get to some comic news. We've missed a lot of announcements on the show. I guess I can go over quite a few of them.
Can we talk about Blue and Gold?
Yeah, that's definitely on the list. Who isn't excited for that? That one, I pretty cool, I think. It's going to be really interesting to see Jurgens back on it. Ryan Sook is art. Blue and Gold, featuring Blue Beetle and Booster Gold, coming out this July.
8-issue miniseries. Yeah, I mean, Dan Jurgens bringing the Bwahaha back to the Blue and Gold tag team. Ryan Sook on art, or Sook, excuse me. Shut up and take my money. It's really that simple.
Yeah. Everybody's ready for Ted Core to be back. I'm more of a Jaime fan, so I was like,
no shade against Jaime. Great character, but there's just something classic about the pairing of Ted Gordon and Booster.
Yeah, that's what a lot of fans are excited about, and I was like, that's pretty cool. I'm sure I'll check it out. But if it was
not dissimilar to Harley and Ivy, Nick. Let me put it in terms I know you'll respond well to.
That makes sense. Okay, so we've got Marvel announced a new Aliens. I guess it's like a one-shot or a mini aftermath from Benjamin Percy and Dave Wachter, also coming in July.
Right, it's sort of like an epilogue to Aliens, the movie, right?
Yeah, it's gonna kind of follow in on that, and also like bring some tones in, I think, from Philip Kennedy Johnson's Aliens run. Okay. That's just kind of kicking off, so that should be pretty cool. I'm excited to see that.
Right?
We've got Marvel dropped a trailer for the Women of Marvel #1 that I know Gabrielle had some thoughts on.
Yes, it was a very good anthology. I thought it was incredible. A lot of great stories in there. And I'm looking forward to see what a couple of other people have to say about it. I know that Dune is going to do a bit of a deeper dive into some of the stories once she's back at it.
Nice.
Very
I
nice.
think that was one that honestly I didn't see enough people talking about. Like, it's one of those anthologies. I feel like a lot of people kind of look over these collection issues as just kind of like,
it was sort of weird because Marvel Voices and then the Marvel Indigenous Voices, like those had a relatively large amount of hype coming leading up to them, and Women of Marvel didn't seem to, and that's really regrettable on Marvel's part. Like they just did not do enough to promote this book. So good on them for doing it. Bad on them for not having the faith in their product or the spirit of the project itself to really give it the push that it should have.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
Sad deal.
And on the other side, DC just announced that the Superman title, the current ongoing, is coming to an end to be replaced by Superman, Son of Kal-El, from Tom Taylor and John Timms.
Hey.
Pretty big, right?
Yeah, John Kent taking over the role of his father, Protector of Earth, while Dad's off in space dealing with Warworld, Mongol, and some terrible, terrible things that were that we saw in Future State playing out. So, not surprisingly, Future State kind of told us the future as to what we could expect in DC books later on this year.
Yeah. So true. And that's another spinoff that's happening is Shazam. Is a mini series that's coming out. It's spinning out of Teen Titans Academy, which was heavily tied into the Future State Teen Titans. And that's going to be from Tim Sheridan and Clayton Henry. So it looks like it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, and again, if you read Tim Sheridan's Shazam 2-parter from Future State, solid stuff.
Yeah,
very
absolutely.
exciting.
And friend of the Comic Watchers show too.
Yeah, friend of the show. Killed it on the first issue of Teen Titans Academy. I think #2 comes out next week. Dude's just a really, really solid writer. He's gonna have and is in the midst of having a breakout year. So check him out.
While I would have preferred a Bat Pack spinoff, I guess Shazam will have to do.
Yeah. What can you do?
Yeah. Image just announced a new miniseries, MOM, Mother of Madness. And interestingly enough, Game of Thrones star Emilia Clarke is going to be writing it with Marguerite Bennett on art. It's about a single mom named Maya who discovers she possesses freakish superpowers. So,
and in other Emilia Clarke news this week, she has signed on to join the cast of Marvel's Secret Invasion miniseries for Disney Plus next year. Her role is under wraps. I'm going to say Vegas odds is that she plays Varanki, the Skrull Queen. So that would definitely tap into a little bit of the Mother of Dragons mode that we know her and love her for so much.
Yeah. And I thought of that when Image announced this book too, just also tapping into that Mother vibe.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a branding thing happening with Emilia Clarke.
She's definitely discovering her niche.
I mean, if it works,
yeah, right.
Let's
see. Marvel has announced the last Annihilation coming up this summer. As you can imagine, it's them getting back into their big hit Annihilation and all of its attendant miniseries and series that flowed out of that. What will the Annihilation wave be this time? We don't know, but it's supposed to be the worstest, biggest thingy ever this week at Marvel to threaten everything. So
we also got that cover that showed the blacked out space of the whatever it is, and it's physically big as well as thematically big.
Yes, absolutely.
It's big. We have some stuff to look forward to.
Marvel, we love our event series. So, guys, I am drawing a blank on anything else just huge and earth-shattering this week. Oh, Superman and the Authority 4-issue miniseries by Grant Morrison launches in July as well. A lot of good books coming out in July from DC.
Yeah.
Very exciting time there. This is not your daddy's Authority. Apollo and Midnighter are there. Everybody else is kind of a new face to the team of the Authority. So what does that look like? What the heck is Grant Morrison going to do this time? Only Grant Morrison knows. This is always the case. But as you can be sure that at Comic Watch, we will be following up on it.
Absolutely. And I guess I can end with the biggest news, hardly it. But we did a news watch long before the death of Comic Watch happened about a Deadpool manga happening. And I was so excited. I did the PR real quick, got it pushed out so everybody could see it. And then I saw that it wasn't happening in English and I couldn't really read it so well. Well, the big news is that it is being translated. Deadpool Samurai is coming early 2022 to English readers. And hello, I'm one of them, so I'm so ready for this one. I'm seeing Marvel trying to get a little bit more into that market. They've got some other stuff happening that is going to be translated throughout the year of 2022, so we should be seeing more from that side of Marvel next year.
Very cool. Very cool.
That is
always like it when we try to tap into the manga or anime synergy with our characters, because sometimes the results suck, but sometimes it's a cool new interpretation of familiar characters. So what does Deadpool look like in manga form? That's really weird, but I guess we're going to find out.
Super similar, oddly enough, and this is also a really sucky transition into our mutant discussion because Deadpool has been left out of pretty much all things in the Hickman era, unfortunately, and technically a mutant. So Way of X, is this how we?
Deadpool's not a mutant. Don't confuse the kids at home.
Deadpool is like mutant adjacent.
Yes,
yeah,
he hangs out with all the best mutants. And sometimes the worst mutants, but he's not a mutant. I actually had to correct a young fan on Facebook the other day who had no idea that Deadpool's regenerative properties were given to him by Canada's Department H as part of the attempted cure for cancer, and that his ability to teleport is not inborn, but rather discs in his suit. So, the more you know.
The more you know.
Now, you can tell me things about Harley Quinn next time.
They dealt with it a little bit in
Listen, I know that the chances of this never happening are very strong, but Marvel and DC, just make a Deadpool and Harley Quinn crossover happen in print. Yeah. It's a license to print money, okay? We get it. You're owned by giant corporations now. It's not the 90s anymore. We're not desperate for sales. Whatever. There are literally no two characters that should be together in a comic more than these two. And that's my little spiel on that.
Well, I mean, I'd buy it, so I don't know how much I'd like it, but I'd still buy it. Probably
oh, yeah. Okay.
You know.
You'd buy 10.
Yeah. I think grumbling all the way to the cash register type of thing, you know.
With that in mind, let's talk about this 13th X-Men title that started this week. Way of X, #1, long awaited, from Cy Spurrier and Bob Quinn, Java Tartaglia on art, and Clayton Cowles on letters. So this is kind of a big deal. And like I said at the beginning, I think this book represents an inflection point for where we've been in the Krakoa era and where we're going. So if you've been living under a rock, buckle up, because this is a steep learning curve. But basically on Krakoa, mutants have defeated death with their resurrection protocols. They are fucking like it's no tomorrow, regardless of whether it's in character or not. It's just like a big tiki bar of a party all over the island, and we love them for it. But there's some real serious issues afoot. there's a kind of imperialist, elitist attitude that's prevalent in the society. It's kind of like Magneto's viewpoints have overtaken pretty much everybody. There is a really, really weird thing happening where mutants or former mutants that were depowered by Scarlet Witch during M-Day go through something called the Crucible, where they get to pick who murders them so that they can be reborn as a really newly empowered mutant. It's not the X-Men that most of us are used to. And there's a lot of people that are like, what the hell? This is really weird. And that's a whole separate conversation. But Kurt Wagner is one of those mutants. And he is, this was back in X-Men number 7, which is the issue that introduced the Crucible concept, which was like, I don't know, over a year ago now. But Nightcrawler's kind of our POV character here, and he's rightly disturbed by this. So we haven't touched on this subplot through all of the Dawn of X, Reign of X era since that issue. And Nightcrawler himself has kind of just been hanging out in the background, not really doing much of anything. And then lo and behold, here comes Cy Spurrier making his triumphant return to the corner of the X-Men, post-Legion, post-X-Force, which were his initial outings. And he's bringing with him Bob Quinn, hot off of Captain America right now. And this is the Nightcrawler book. This is the book that all of this sort of unease and surrogate fan view that the X-Men just aren't quite right is sort of a meta commentary on in a lot of ways. And in putting this comic out, they kind of created a perfect comic in a lot of ways. Like, this is no hype. This is a 10 out of 10 comic. And it's because it is dealing with these heavy, heavy themes in multi-layered, multifaceted ways with super strong characterization throughout. There's not a false note to be had. And it's just really looking at the last year and a half's journey through all of these various X-Men books in a very sharp relief and a contrast to what's been happening. And Gabriel, you know what? You're our guest. You're a resident expert. Yeah. Let's get your thoughts on Way of X. Like, just ramble as much as you like.
I do not give me permission to just ramble, because I will take you up on that. Way of X left me with a lot of kind of questions. Like you said, it kind of really takes that viewpoint of all those people who've been saying for the past year and a half, where are my X-Men? These aren't my X-Men. And it kind of does leave me a little bit cautious, because while there is a section of the fandom that is very much questioning what happened once they got on Krakoa, there is also another section of the fandom, myself included, who continue to resonate with this being the next step. So I am a little bit nervous about how that might get unraveled, because let's be honest, it's comics. It's going to get unraveled eventually.
Sure.
And I just hope they do it in a way that isn't discounting the way people related. Primarily with the Crucible. I know that just by looking at X Twitter, a lot of people really connected with the Crucible and that kind of struggle. So I am a little bit nervous about them now painting the Crucible as this barbaric event. So I am curious as to how the fandom is going to react, what Cy Spurrier is going to do next with this change. The one thing that did really stuck out to me was the kind of nonchalant way that they discuss Charles Xavier using his powers to influence people, which has been another huge theory as to why the X-Men are all acting weird, is just blame it on Charles. Charles is evil.
Why is
yes.
he always wearing that giant Cerebro helmet?
Because he has a bad fashion sense. He got tips from Kate Pride. But yeah,
Who's Kate out of this?
it was a very good issue. It was a very strong issue. I love whenever a comic comes at it and it's like we've been listening to what people have been saying. It's one of the reasons I absolutely adore almost every issue of X Factor, because Leah Williams has she's tapped right into the fandom. And it kind of feels that Siberia might be doing the same. And I just have respect for writers who listen to fans, at least a little bit.
Absolutely. But I gotta say, and I don't mean to cut you off a little bit, but I like it. The seeds for this book were planted back in X-Men #7. And then, of course, COVID happened last year. The industry shut down for 3 months. Cross of Swords had to happen, from a grand standpoint. So, I mean, in all honesty, this book probably was going to have come out much sooner now in the overall narrative than it actually has. Mm-hmm. So... which is just, one way of saying it's definitely been planned as part of the greater narrative. Like, there's nothing happening right now in the Krakoa books that is not part of this overarching thing. And how this ends, this is actually one of the things that I love most about this era. Like, I know I sounded weirdly dismissive of it at first and kind of like a cranky old man, but no, I am absolutely in love with the Krakoa era. I've never been more enthralled and enthused with every single one of the X-Men books that are coming out. And it's because they're doing such daring things right now. So many things that, I mean, at one time, they're just casually doing things that are, would have been at one time taboo, like the throuple between Wolverine, Cyclops, and Jean Grey.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, they don't make a big deal out of it. It's just a thing that's happening, Yeah. And the fact that got quote unquote good and villainous mutants just hanging out. I am eagerly awaiting the day that Sabretooth breaks free of his prison, because we know it's coming and it's gonna be bad.
You see, I kind of want the exact opposite. I want him to be like, hey, you served your time, and then expect him to just integrate with the rest of Krakoa after everyone else has
going that way. Actually, I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. But we've seen that. Victor Creed don't play that game.
I know this is. I know this is. I know this
game
is off topic, but I was a huge fan of Axis Inverted Sabretooth.
Yeah, definitely.
And I want him back. Like, can we get rid of?
Like, this is definitely a sidebar, but the fact that he was kind of like a slightly rougher around the edges Wolverine, but still a good guy, and Logan just wouldn't trust him for anything, waiting for the other shoe to drop, given their history. I loved that. But yes, it ain't happening anytime soon. Nick, you're a little bit of a relative outsider and newcomer to the world of X-Men. Give us your thoughts on Way of X. Let's get back on that topic.
Yeah, I am very deep into catching up into a lot of things X-Men. There's so many books, and I read before I get started, I heard you say Cross of Swords. I've heard 10 of Swords, and I've heard X of Swords. Is there any distinction? What is the real one?
I'm actually pretty sure that it is supposed to be 10 of Swords because of the
tarot cards.
Yeah, but I just said it wrong.
But after House of X and Powers of 10, I trust nothing anymore.
Nothing.
Who knows what it is?
Yeah, so that's where I kind of started. Like, my main X-Men, I've really never been so into them before. A lot of the nuance, I guess, escaped me, and I came into this whole Hickman era thinking that it was this brilliant next step for a disenfranchised community in the Marvel universe, and that it was this really great way to kind of bring them together and set them apart and totally flip the script on this story that we've known for so long. And it felt so progressive and so united and everything. And we're seeing it break down. And Travis shared some thoughts on Twitter, who writes the Patricia High Smash column with us, and is always on a Mutant Watch show, talking about how it's great to like it, but it's very much not so progressive. There's a lot of imperialist agenda happening. The first thing they did was have kings and queens, and you've got the Crucible happening. There's a lot of issues, and I think Way of X does more to break
All
down.
pigs are equal, but some pigs are more equal than others.
Right? Like
If I
this,
get literary with it for a second.
the very first time that I felt like reading a book that I was like, this is very much not really the Eden that Magneto is telling everybody that he tells Kurt, you're so busy looking for snakes, you can't see Eden. And I cannot get that thought out of my head because that was kind of me. I'm like trying to read into this and it just feels so good, but there's something coming. And I feel like Way of X tugs at that string where it starts to break down before you. And there's a line. So we learned a little bit from Dr. Nemesis, who people have been kind of asking, where he's at and everything. We learned he had a lot to do with the medicine that was provided to humans. A lot of the
now he's
infographic
throwing
text.
various fungi out of his head.
Yeah.
One of the best visuals I've seen in a long time.
But I have never really been a fan of Dr. Nemesis.
Oh, how do you not love Dr. Nemesis? He's such an asshole in the best way.
I just find him to be an asshole in an annoying way, and he just is. But that being said, those data pages won me over for Dr. Nemesis for the first time ever, and
Science Core.
It was so confusing for me. I get to the end of the comic. I'm like, wait, do I like Dr. Nemesis now?
Yes.
How did that happen?
So yes, for those of you who haven't read it yet, his proposed Science Core has 4 divisions: physical sciences, life sciences, sentient irrationality, formal and exact sciences, each broken down into various laboratories and specialties. And then under each one of them, the supervisor is always Dr. Nemesis.
Not everyone.
Except for law and ethics. Situation vacant. I laughed out loud when I read that page.
Like that,
especially his little postscript note for Mr. Sinister after genetic diversity program, of course, which he's the specialist of. It says, "Shut up, Sinister. You don't have a monopoly on this. Stick to your dreary eugenics and leave the genomic adventuring to a professional."
Okay.
So much personality.
He's talking about eugenics for a very specific reason, because that's kind of what I wanted to get to. This is the point where I literally set the book down, and it was probably 20 minutes before I could pick it back up, because it changed almost entirely everything about how I'm approaching all of these X books. Because he's talking about the Crucible and how there's an emphasis on strength and warlike nature and the capacity to endure pain, and how there's this hierarchy to who's getting resurrected and who's on the wait list to be resurrected.
Right.
And how in that way, Xavier and the Quiet Council are kind of doing their own form of eugenics, or almost Darwinism, for how they're choosing which mutants are on Krakoa. So he says, in other words, we're seeing a new evolutionary. He says we're seeing a new evolutionary mechanism at work: selection by means of prejudicial resurrection.
Yeah, and that's interesting.
That is something that I had not thought of.
Well, and it also makes you want to go back, through the whole damn thing, and look at who's getting resurrected. Because I would be willing to bet that that's 100% accurate. If we go back and look at everyone.
Yeah, and but we're seeing it, this is not some Eden where mutants are just doing whatever they want, everything's happy, like you said, everybody's partying, everybody's fucking, it's all lighthearted, it's super chill. But there's some creepy stuff happening that's kind of dark. And we're seeing that there's a form of selection with mutants in the resurrection that ties almost intrinsically to what Kurt's going through right now when he first said in X-Men #7 that he wanted to start a mutant religion.
Right.
And then he's like, I'm struggling to find the inspiration. Seeing all these things around him, and the Crucible struck him really hard. I think it was Arrow in in X-Men 7 who, when they were resurrected, and I think Jean says the flyers always fly, and because they take up into the sky, and it kind of struck Kurt as I need to do this, and it's an exploration of a side of culture of Krakoa that we don't really see so often. But I'm getting all excited for this religiosity state of Krakoa and mutants, and Kurt's starting to shy away from it already and being like, I'm struggling for inspiration. And then this happens on top of that, where it's creepy that there's a new evolutionary mechanism happening right before all of our eyes, because you can see it in its stark reality with Pixie, who I don't think I'll ever get that panel out of my head now of Pixie like going up to the shotgun and none of them are worried about death, and it just goes off.
Yeah. That is the other huge theme in this book, is the way that Krakoa has cheapened the meaning of death. Like, to the point where these younger generation mutants just absolutely don't care, and in fact even celebrate, in a sense, when Pixie gets her freaking head blown off, because it means she gets to go through her first resurrection, which she has yet to do. And it's like this social rite of passage. But if you're Kurt and you grew up in a staunch religious environment, and this is regardless of its Catholicism with Kurt, or Islam, or Protestant Christianity, whatever, Judaism, any of them, anything, the idea of death and an afterlife, or even just a cycle of rebirth, if you're talking about more Eastern philosophies, is always there. So what does that mean to somebody whose identity is so strongly tied up in their faith and the belief of an afterlife, when death has no meaning? What does that do to the soul?
I think it might actually, from what I saw in that same panel with Pixie, it goes beyond just, I think, not having meaning. It's kind of like back in the age of Jackass. Like, when Pixie is literally getting shot, you see DJ having his phone up to record it.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Awesome.
I did not notice that.
Yeah. And on the note of DJ, I have been a hardcore fan of DJ.
Oh, he is.
Since, we had the whole whopping, 2 panels of his existence before they killed him off. And
dude gets his powers from listening to music. Like, it's
such an amazing concept.
Great. Why did nobody think of that?
And now we finally meet him, and he has the chance to have a personality, and I want to punt the kid.
He's kind of a shallow douche nozzle, right? I'm with you on that.
I'm like,
it's not just him.
It is not just him, because Blink is also engaging in it. Lowe is engaging in it. And you know what? Siceveria saw the opportunity, this blank slate character who, due to the nature of his power, it's very easy to turn him into the, YouTube Jackass era, TikTok bro, whatever you want to call him based on your generation. He is primed to be that person, and it makes sense in the plot. But I've been in love with this character for 10 years now, and now I want to punt him. So Dawn.
But that was and that's right at the beginning of Way of X too. You see this where Nightcrawler's going out on this, mission outside of Krakoa finally, and Xavier's just checking in on him. I wanted to check in on an old friend. And we see this mission not really go so right, but like you said, they're videoing it and celebrating it when Pixie's head gets blown off. And Kurt is like, this is not right. I know resurrection is right there, but it still does not feel right.
Yeah.
And I think at one point he even, later in the issue when he's talking to Xavier, he mentions that it was Catholicism paranoia or something like that.
Yeah. As he's trying to find the thing that's wrong, but he can't put his finger on it. He just knows in his gut something is wrong.
Yeah.
Even though intellectually nothing is wrong.
Yeah.
So, that's good. Now, what's interesting is the amount of play that Xavier himself gets in this issue, because, he's, of course, been around throughout this entire Dawn of X, Reign of X era, but he's always distant and aloof. And this is the first time in about a year and a half that I think he's really been treated like a character with more than with some depth and some layers to him. And we see that, or at least we get this hint that he knows Kurt is onto something with his doubt and his trepidation, but he's so invested in everything that he's done so far that he can't personally, as a figurehead, deviate from the path that he's on, but he's not afraid to point Kurt in that direction a little bit. And I think, that goes back to what you were saying about telepaths and Xavier in particular, and there's manipulation of people, whether they mean to or not. But I think that's really, really interesting. Are we beginning to see a little bit of a rift here between Xavier and this paradise? What do you guys think? Especially since we're getting into some, I don't want to spoil the end of the book, although I really want to talk about the end of the book. But I don't know. I'll let you guys decide if we spoil that.
I have so much. Xavier's evil. I'm sorry, Xavier has always been evil. That is my theory. I hate the guy. He's a dick. He's a perv. He's a creep. And the moment he came back and tricked Phantom X into giving up his body way back in Astonishing X-Men, I was like, yeah, he's even more evil now. So I don't buy his feeding into Kurt. I think that it's manipulation to get him to go do exactly what he gets Kurt to do at the ending of the book. I don't trust the guy. I never trust the guy. I trust the guy less now that I know he's plotting and lying to everyone but Magneto.
There's something to that. We've got a comment in YouTube from Ali Galactic. It's kind of getting to a lot of what really bothered me about Way of X. They said how everything leading up to it said that this all had meaning, and then Way of X says no, it doesn't. And we never got eased into that mode of seeing Krakoa. It just happened suddenly, and it felt bad. There's a lie that's something happened.
To that.
We all feel this underlying lie that Xavier is kind of propagating, and we all are kind of expecting it to just explode in these random issues that are happening, and we're all just on kind of anticipating it because, like Gabrielle said, I don't know if Xavier is evil, but I can see how you think that, and is that the trick? There's something here. I don't know.
And I think that what it's going to be boiling down to, and I think I might be on the same page as Ali Galactic in that we all know that Xavier is essentially gaslighting everyone. Everything's fine. There's a reason for this. But is it that Xavier is, or is the entirety of the Krakoan society is? And Way of X is kind of implying that it's the entire Krakoan society. They want us to think it's a utopia. And I don't like that. I don't like that we spent, and I get that, the pandemic changed how long this would have been, but I don't like the concept that we spent a year and a half coming to terms with the symbolism behind Krakoa, and now there was no symbolism behind Krakoa. We just wanted you to think that. If that's the route I'm hoping it's not going. And
I don't know that it is. I mean, I think if you want to be cynical about it, you can take that perspective. but here's the thing. There really and truly are the self-determination, the being proud of who you are, the just, you know what, we're going to take care of us, and y'all need to catch up to us now. Owning it attitude of the Krakoa era is to me a very good and empowering message. It gets X-Men as a franchise over this hump that it's just been stuck on for the entirety of its existence, where it's always the X-Men are the victims of the world. It's flipping that script, right? The X-Men are owning their power and their identities now. And that's great. That is super freaking great.
Yeah.
But the there are consequences to their utopian ideals too, and so now we're getting to the back end of that, and I think there's always going to have been an end point in mind for this. I think this Krakoan era is pretty standard 3-act play in a lot of ways. 10 of Swords ended the first act, and boy did it end it on a bang, right? I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe in lieu of the fact that we have not had an announcement for another big X-Men crossover later this year, I think the Hellfire Gala is going to be the end of the second act because of whatever it is that they're introducing in planet-sized X-Men, and everything is barreling towards a heart-wrenching conclusion because, as we know from House of X and Powers of 10, all of the various Moira X timelines end in tragedy for mutants every single time.
Okay,
What does
I
that
definitely
look like?
hear you. Like I really hear you. It's a pretty good setup. There could be this 3-act play happening where everything is just part of the plan. Everybody chill. But I would like to counter that with the very first page of Way of X and the very first line, where in the preambles and brain farts it says, "Let us be under no illusions. I am making this up as I go."
How meta commentary?
How significant is that line at a time when we're looking towards Way of X to expand on Kurt wanting to do this mutant religion on Krakoa, on us, scheming on Xavier, thinking there's something lying there waiting on something to go horribly wrong, that the end of Krakoa will happen and everything will unravel and we'll go back to kind of the status quo, that there's this big plan happening. What if they are just winging it? What if they are just making it all up as they go along?
I'm utterly wrong. But here's the thing. Jonathan Hickman, for all of his flaws as a writer, and that's a whole separate sidebar, he plans and he plots. If you go back to his Avengers run, it is set and read it from end to end, from Avengers #1 and then subsequently New Avengers #1. All the pieces are in place that would eventually end his run with Secret War. He really does. I mean, yeah, of course there's going to be stuff that doesn't go according to script. That's any writer. But he knows where he's going with this. I don't believe that there's not an end game. Now, the question is, and I'm sorry, I'll let somebody else talk in a second. I promise. Sorry. I've got so many thoughts on this whole thing. The question is after Hickman is done telling his story, what does the rest of Marvel do after he's moved on?
And I wish I could remember where I saw or read Hickman saying this. It might have been at a con before pandemic. It might have been on Twitter. I don't know. But it might have been a fever dream and I'm making this all up. But I distinctly remember that Hickman had said that he does have an exit plan for his story. But when he pulls out that exit plan is completely dependent on the readers. So I think that he definitely does have how this all ends, but I think that the timeline may not be as concrete as the 3-act structure. It might just be that he always has the next act planned. Is it 3 acts? Is it 2 acts? Is it 12 acts?
Could be.
How long are we going to keep buying?
Listen, if you're Marvel, you want to keep this gravy train rolling as long as you can.
Yeah.
X-Men as a franchise has not been this popular, i.e. profitable, in forever, like probably since the 90s. If you really want to get down to brass tacks and look at it that way.
And is it like how a lot of writers approach, if they're handed an ongoing, you have a beginning and you have an end, but that end could happen in 12 issues or that end could happen in 55 issues. And you need to have story that will happen in between that will still make it feel like a completed run, no matter which happens.
Right.
And when you're talking about 12, 13 titles on that approach, you need somebody who can plan like Hickman. You need somebody who has that ability to outline and to look ahead, but also the ability to be a little bit more freeform with it and to be fluid.
Mm-hmm.
And
he's got such a
like that.
phenomenal cadre of writers that he's working with in this project. I think he trusts his writers. He certainly trusts Jerry Duggan.
Right. And honestly, I know we want to talk a little bit about Children of the Atom, a great time to bring that up, because that feels like something that came up, as a reflection of what we're seeing in this Hickman era. Now that we've got all this, what about a story like Children of the Atom? I could see that really happening.
Right.
And VDL is just killing it.
Yes.
Go ahead.
like straight killing, because there's a whole mystery happening behind there. You're already just deeply entrenched into this mystery of Krakoa and how these mutants are acting, and then you're kind of like flung back on regular Earth and these Cyclops lass and all these characters that are respectful homages, as they put it, to the X-Men. That it feels like it's a kind of this offshoot of this idea of you can keep this story going in interesting ways.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have the right talent like Vita Ayala behind it that can really pull it off, it works really well with the lore, with the mythology, with everything that's being established on Krakoa, and can push it forward in exciting ways. And you don't need that exit plan so quickly. But I could talk about that.
No, definitely. And you're absolutely right. This is the book, like Children of the Atom, that really boomerangs just everything that's going on with the other X-Men world books right now, and throws it back into the real world and kind of looks at, how is the rest of the world, just average people on the streets, reacting to this? How is this changing society? Because it would, in a major way. And I'm like, none of us knew what the hell to expect from Children of the Atom. I mean, first of all, the damn book got shut up, and the damn book got pushed back 2 times. We had the promo art with the weird homage characters. Like, what the hell is this? A girl Cyclops? That's craziness. And so yeah, the book comes out, and it's just this wonderfully pleasant surprise because, again, nobody knew what it was really about. And
I don't think we still know what it's about, to be completely honest. Like, Vita is purposely, they are writing this to keep us guessing for as long as possible.
Yeah.
But it's amazing. Like, amazing. It's a work
the
of art.
characterization is so strong. I mean, these kids feel real, and their world very, very lived in as kids that are coming of age in this Dawn of X era. Are they depowered mutants? Are they wannabe mutants with tech enhancements? Well, they keep trying to go through the Krakoa gate and failing. What's up with that?
And then they meet the X-Men and they say, "Come home." And
but they're not showing up on Cerebro.
Yeah.
So what the hell? We don't know. But Vita Ayala, Bernard Chang, Marcelo Mayolo, just killing it.
Yeah, and
in that book.
I will always sing Vita Ayala's praises. They are amazing, but it's the whole team that is killing it. Because, like you said, they feel real, but they also look like real people. Yeah. They're not caricatures. They're not exaggerations.
Not all impossibly beautiful.
They look real, and just it's a great book.
Yes, it really is. And I feel like a lot of people are probably sleeping on it right now just because nobody knew what the hell it was going to be. Yeah. And, those of us who are just invested in X-Men all across the board right now, those of us who will pick up anything with Vita's name on it, because they're just phenomenally talented. We knew we were going to get a good book. We just didn't know what we were getting. So
I also think that Children of the Atom is suffering because there's a lot of fans that don't want new characters. They just want us to
that backlash.
Yeah, I've seen so much hate for Children of the Atom simply because it's not the Academy X kids. And I love the Academy X kids, pretty much every single one of them. But it's the whole point of Krakoa, the whole point of Marvel, heck, is building a world. And you can't build a world if you don't add new characters every once in a while.
Absolutely. You should always, as a writer, of somebody else's, playing in somebody else's toy box, you should always be looking to be additive. What new can you bring? Yeah. Nick, you may or may not remember this, but way back when we had Eric Larson on the show, he's the one that said that. You should, if you kill characters, you better be ready to replace it with something, because you just took away somebody's favorite toy. And
that makes a lot of sense.
Children of the Atom really is adding something new and unique to the X-Men world right now.
If only we could figure out what.
But that's really the strongest point of it, and I think that's what's a great contrast to our discussion on Way of X, because you can really get into the religiosity of mutants and this new, cultural exploration of Krakoa, and then you can look at Children of the Atom and see how it's impacting the rest of the world in ways that you really wouldn't expect. That
they're mirror image books of each other.
Yeah, they're really strange to contrast with each other, and if you read them like back to back, you can kind of get this bigger picture feel of just the storytelling potential that this whole Hickman era has for X-Men. And it's with imperialist undertones and things that are shady and things that you don't agree with, but the potential
there are things
of
that are deeply uncomfortable going on.
I mean, if we end this Hickman era early, what other stories like Children of the Atom are we missing out on that it could lead to? And that's what I'm excited to see, and also why, I haven't been reading X-Men for 10 years, but I don't want to see this era end so quick. I'm ready to see it continue for a while and see how this works in the greater Marvel universe.
Yeah, I agree with that. And again, like I said, after Hickman eventually does pull out and go on to do whatever else he's going to do, maybe he'll finally write that Legion of Superheroes story that he hinted at before he signed on to X-Men. Do it. Bendis failed us. Marvel would be dummies to end this and not keep it going as long as they can, right? But sequential superhero storytelling that does not have an end is always going to go back to the beginning of its second act. We've seen it 1,000 times. Yes. You'll never read the last Batman story, although I know, Gabriel, you wish you could. But, in all seriousness, at some point, Marvel is going to go back to basics. Were you alienated by that Krakoa era? We're going to open a mansion again and hide out from the world and train new kids. And, it's inevitable.
With how much new readership and returning readership Hickman got with Krakoa, like Nick, you're a prime example. It brought you back. I'm yes, Hickman absolutely is eventually going to be leaving, but I'm hoping that Marvel learns and they move forward from Krakoa instead of circling back into as if it never was. Like you said, you referred to it, like you said, it's sequential storytelling. So go forward with it. Like keep moving.
I agree with that. I totally agree with that.
You're right. It happens all the time. We're always going backwards. Can we not? Just once.
Hey, I'm with you. Don't get me wrong. Can we please not this once? But there's a public perception of who and what the X-Men is as an IP. And eventually, if the comics are too misaligned with that IP, somebody is going to step on them and be like, you need to get this thing back in line with what we think the IP should be. And that's just the unfortunate reality of corporate-owned comics.
See, and that's something I've been thinking, and maybe it'll be another hour onto the show. Sorry if I keep you late. But the IP of... I'm super into fandom. That's why I do all this. I love comics. But I'm in this for fandom. It's the community. X fans are insanely amazing. They're up there with Valiant fans. There's a huge, deeply devoted fan base there happening.
All 4 of them. Valiant burn. No, I'm just playing.
Okay. But it feels like it is their own publisher almost. If you're reading the X books, it feels like a separate thing. So we've got the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We're in this transitionary period for the X-Men franchise as an intellectual property. If you get the cinematic universe who introduces the X-Men into that world through Krakoa, does it change the intellectual property of X-Men fundamentally where you can keep something like this and it becomes the new identity? Because like what Gabriel's saying, if you go back on this, it's not just putting the toys back in the toy chest. You're doing something socially that is going to be a huge misstep, and it's going to be a hard sell to go away from Krakoa and back to Westchester or something like that. I don't see how you can do that and not spin it in a way that's like Matt saying, like, were you alienated by Krakoa? How do you do that and say this isn't going back to just tossing mutants into the bigots world and saying deal with it? So is the best step forward to push the X-Men franchise forward using the cinematic universe that has the massive appeal? And, what if they're introduced into the cinematic universe through the calling of the Krakoa sovereignty happening? Now here's all this medicine. Do you accept it or not? And you've got everybody who we've come to know and love over these 10 plus years dealing with that decision.
I have heard that theory before, and I absolutely hated it until right now. And I'm like, okay, I'm on board with this now. When you put it that way, you got a good point.
Like, I can't stop thinking about it because I've been reading so many X-Men books: X Factor, X-Force, Cable. I've been catching up on Marauders, the X-Men run, and I'm doing all this thinking, yeah, we are in a time where people are going to come and sit down in an X-Men movie and think about Hugh Jackman as Wolverine and, crying about Jean. This is not going to be the X-Men that they can expect, and this is an opportunity. What is Marvel laying the foundations right now in this expansive Hickman era for what it looks like for the greater Marvel universe, even in the cinematic range? Like, do they flip the script? They pulled on Winter Soldier really quick compared to some of the other stories, Civil War even. They've shown that they can pull modern stories pretty quickly, and we're already 2 years into this. It could be another couple years before we see an X-Men movie. That's a pretty decent time frame for them to pull into Krakoa, and it's just expansive, it's just big enough, it's just popular enough where maybe it's not such a dream. Maybe it could actually happen, and maybe it could reinvigorate the X-Men franchise in a way that would fundamentally change it moving forward forever, where you can't go back to that, where it would be too devastating and too synonymous with saying, we don't really care about this mutant struggle. We're going back to them being surrounded by bigots and, becoming disenfranchised people again, fighting for their own existence. And I couldn't see that happening. I don't see how you could sell it like that. But I do see that path.
Massive, massive step back in a lot of ways. And I mean, it just.
But I couldn't help but feel Kurt is also dealing with that in Way of X. He's dealing with this transitionary moment for mutants.
How do you put the genie back in the bottle?
Yeah, it's out now. Like, you can't, and that's what he talks about in the first preambles and brain farts. I hope to learn what we ought to believe. I learned instead how we ought to live. What we believe to be the X-Men franchise and what they're living it is now is two very different things, but can they become the same? And are we in that transition moment? Is this a meta commentary on something a lot bigger? And yeah, you can read a lot into it, but there's some things there that you can latch onto.
And what you're saying with it being a bit of a meta commentary, like you said, it's like, I think from what Kurt is going through is less, how do I put the genie back in the bottle, and more, I let the genie out of the bottle. What the fuck is it? What did I let out?
Williams.
And I think that is a good meta commentary about Krakoa. It's like, okay, we made this step forward. Where the fuck are we now? What did we end up turning into?
Yeah,
absolutely. And I actually think that is a really, really solid place to end this discussion, because that is really what Way of X is looking at, is that meta commentary on just this average person's, wait, what the fuck happened to the X-Men? And not in a dismissive way, right? I mean, it's looking at it in a really thought-provoking, multifaceted, multi-layered way. And I mean, I gotta tell you, excuse me, the art is just awesome. Alley Galactic says we need to keep going. I don't know how much more I could do with this without alcohol, and I'm trying to drink till the weekend. So Bob Quinn on the art, I didn't care for his stuff on Captain America, right? It looked like he was still kind of feeling his way out as an artist, learning the ropes a little bit. Man, he shines on Way of X. Holy shnikes. This is a pretty looking book. And God, Cy Spurrier, I just don't think the man gets the props he deserves, and he gets a lot of props. He's just a brilliant writer in so many ways. So yeah, check this comic out. If you have been, for whatever reason, not a fan of the Krakoa era, this is a book to check out. If you're a fan of really, really good comics, this is a book to check out. If you're a fan of Nightcrawler, this is a book. You get it. Just get this damn comic. If you pick up one X-Men book, make it this one, because this really is something special. There is an intellectualism to this comic that we do not typically see in big two mainstream books. It is something very unique, and it would not shock me, assuming it continues on this trajectory, if it doesn't wind up on an Eisner watch list.
I can see it.
Yeah, and it deserves it. I mean, based on the first issue. I mean, unless it just goes off a cliff next issue and we're like fighting dinosaurs in the Savage Land for no reason.
Yeah,
I don't know.
We didn't even get to talk about the spoiler at the end. We could do a whole part 2 on this. Like, there's so much
I just want to get into the end of the issue so much. I don't want to spoil it for people.
Go read it and watch this clip and convince us to do a part 2.
I'm just going to say, if you're a fan of Cy Spurrier and you've been reading him for a while, you're going to be extremely happy by the last page of this book. And that's, just leave it at that. So, Way of X. Just no more Mojo World. X Factor gave us more than enough.
I was a fan.
We're getting a little bit more Mojo World next X Factor.
Brief tangent. And Ali Galactic, since you being our number one fan this episode, I will just tell you, I typically hate Mojo stories. They're all the damn same. Not even Kelly Thompson could pull it off in Mr. and Mrs. X. But man, Leah did something really cool and new and unique in X Factor, and I loved it. So
we're living it. We are living it right now in the stream. We're doing it.
Yep. So with that, I want to real quick give a tip of the hat to Gabriel De Jesus for dropping by from Mutant Watch this Saturday. Gabriel, talk about what's going on the Mutant Watch show.
Okay, so this Saturday, we are having a guest, Robbie McNiven, coming in to talk about his book, The First Team, which is an Anole book. So if you are one of those people who were angry at Children of the Atom because it was not about the new X-Men people, you really need to read that book because it's about the new X-Men people. So we'll be chatting with him about that this Saturday at 3 p.m.
I think by
Eastern
extreme coincidence, it's us three, right?
It is us three.
Nick, aren't you dropping in?
Yes, I am. Powerhouse
the
into it
unofficial
now.
Mutant Watch, Comic Watcher show crossovers will continue this Saturday. Don't miss it. This next week on this show, we have our first ever returning guest, Ahoy CEO and writer of such fantastic comics as Penultiman and The Wrong Earth. Tom Pyre is coming back to hang out with us. I guess we did something right the first time. Yes, it's going to be awesome. It's going to be live. You should definitely check it out. But until then, support your local comic store, read something, and be good to each other. Thank you so much. Thank you to our sponsors, Frankie's Comics, Carson's Corner, and Lemon Juice Comics. And as always, for fandom news and pro reviews, come to the newly revamped, always awesome comic-watch.com. Till next time.